The cage match win rate statistics cited here were last pulled on May 31st, 2025, so that is to say not long before AEW Fyter Fest this year. The Dynamite ratings were pulled a few days before the summer blockbuster show in Portland, which I attended and was excellent. I decided early on in this process that if I had to edit the stats every single time they changed, even though new data piece doesn't dramatically change the sample size, it'd just be a huge waste of time. We've now officially reached the point where Brian Alvarez has floated the idea that AEW's business rebound is thanks to the Death Riders, and that it just cannot be tolerated. At this time a year ago, June 2024, Dynamite was about to garner 790,000 viewers on a show where wildly popular Swerve Strickland successfully defended the World Championship against Roderick Strong. Since then, ratings have been up and down, and it's worth noting that episodes last year did on occasion create TV viewership as low as 500,000. But between June 5th of that year and Wrestle Dream, minus an outlier show that aired at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, AEW averaged around 680,000 viewers per Dynamite. That's a sample of more or less 17 weeks. On October 2nd, their last Dynamite in the regular time slot before Moxley won the title, they pulled 680,000 viewers. They would subsequently not pull an audience that large until January 15th, so it suffices to say that the average was down. In fact, in the first 17 weeks after Jon Moxley won the title, just to use an equivalent sample, AEW pulled an average audience of 611,000 viewers, an average that has improved to 613,000 viewers as of June 4th. Objectively speaking, AEW TV has been down with Moxley as champion, as compared to the period 4 months before he won the title, where it was held consecutively by two babyfaces, Swerve and Bryan Danielson. The last time they cracked 700,000 live viewers was September 11th, a month before Moxley won the title. Don't let anyone tell you MJF wasn't a popular champion with these numbers. Dynamite regularly pulled well over 800,000 even during the death days of the Devil storyline, a decline of 12% year over year. While it has not taken removing the world title from Jon Moxley for AEW ratings to begin rebounding, the fact remains that the rebound has only begun. Some have compared the success of the Death Riders, by some I mean Alvarez again, for example, to that of WWE's Bloodline, which for perspective has probably generated the most non-inflation adjusted revenue of any wrestling storyline ever. We are not in that universe. On the July 9th SmackDown where the Bloodline was officially formed, they pulled at 1.8 million total viewers. The next week they immediately hit 2.1 million, a number they hadn't hit since March, a nearly 14% immediate increase in viewership. The immediate reaction to the Bloodline was interest. The immediate reaction to Moxley, the top star of the promotion, turning heel and then acting like he was invading the place was an immediate decline. A month-long average of 693,000 viewers falling to 605,000, a decline of a nearly mirrored 13%. To attribute the success of Hangman, Swerve, and Ospreay's chases to the heat the Death Riders generated is foolhardy. All three acts were already very popular, had their own momentum before getting involved. There is nothing that the Death Riders or Jon Moxley has done that has made anybody they faced a bigger star than they were before the feud began. This cannot continue. One thing is obviously true even if you are a fan of Jon Moxley. He has been world champion for a truly absurd number of days. AEW has existed for 5.5 years and has named 9 different men as their world champion. Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, CM Punk, MJF, Samoa Joe, Swerve Strickland, and Bryan Danielson. 8 of those men have held the title for a total of 1,421 days combined, or if you prefer, 3.9 years. The other one is Jon Moxley, who has held the title by himself for 2 years, more than 50% as long as anybody else combined. This also means that he has of course won the title more times than anybody else by a huge distance, with each other champion not having held the belt more than once. Both AEW and Cage Match recognize Moxley as a 4-time world champion, but in reality he does have 5 different matches that would each count as meaningful title wins. Let's take a quick look at them. His first title win, he took the title off of Chris Jericho for AEW to have its first babyface champion, capitalizing on his run in New Japan and the momentum he'd been given by getting over on Kenny Omega in his first night in the promotion, a booking decision I'm not upset about, why are you asking? His second was his interim world title win versus Tanahashi at the first Forbidden Door after CM Punk injured himself the show after winning the title. Given the climate of the situation, it was unlikely for Hangman to win it again. MJF wasn't quite at that point in his year yet. He was supposed to obviously take the title from Punk, and Moxley did a great job presenting himself as somebody who would clean things up, so to speak. Then, when CM Punk returned, Moxley infamously managed to beat Punk in less than 5 minutes to unite the world titles on Dynamite. This, rather than the interim title win over Tanahashi, seems to be recognized as his second title win. A few things were certain going into this match, which was that Moxley was absolutely walking out as champion, and that CM Punk was beating him at the pay-per-view. Punk had become incredibly unpopular at this point, even while being out with injury, whilst Moxley, who returned home early from vacation to win the world title again, was seen as self-sacrificing in doing so. However, Tony Khan was still holding on to the possibility of CM Punk being in AEW long-term, and so it was, as mentioned, equally inevitable that after giving Moxley a highly visible win that he would be allowed to continue his reign as champion after the All Out pay-per-view. Moxley's latter two title wins were both egregious in my opinion. After CM Punk injured himself again while beating Moxley for the title on the night of the infamous Brawl Out, Moxley then beat Danielson in the tournament final to become champion a third time, only to lose the title to MJF 2 months later. Considering that MJF turned out to be the best AEW World Champion of all time, and considering MJF's only singles win between losing to Wardlow and winning the title was a 15-minute victory over Wheeler Yuta, it likely would have been better in retrospect for Max, one of the only other guys to get a quality win over CM Punk, to win here, rather than awarding Moxley with another title win, especially since if you started MJF's run earlier, it might have been a little easier to get the belt off of him before the Devil storyline started falling apart. Giving it to Moxley in that situation had no larger benefit other than that MJF got to take the belt off of Moxley explicitly. Absolutely a huge win, but why not just do that exact same job without the title a few months earlier? Did it really need to be Jon Moxley (C) for the match to have juice? It of course isn't Moxley's fault that Tony Khan booked Punk to take the title from him and then Punk got hurt again, but I do have to note that perhaps in retaliation for his workers' rights promo that got Punk so upset in the first place, Hangman was barely sniffing the world title until, well, just now in 2025. But of course, as we all know, the most recent one takes the cake. Fast forward and Bryan Danielson is now AEW champion and he's headed to Tacoma, Washington, the closest large city near his hometown of Aberdeen, to defend the world title against Moxley. Frankly, even booking this match in the first place was kind of offensive, as it was originally slated to be the dangerous and dynamic Darby Allin versus Danielson in what would have been an epic hometown babyface versus hometown babyface styles clash that immediately had all-time classic written all over it. Worth noting in this context as well, the main event of the last Wrestle Dream show had been Christian Cage winning 2 falls to 1 in the main event of that show, and that was a match for the TNT Championship. Surely after handing Allin that loss in front of the Seattle fans and then also taking the match from Allin in storyline, the legendary Danielson would finally give Seattle fans their big happy ending? Not at all. The outcome of this match was a slap in the face to AEW fans, especially those who paid for good tickets to be there, such as myself, and I'm not even really a big Danielson fan. The fact that it was Danielson's idea in the first place is one of the reasons that guy could absolutely never be my goat. A lot of what I just said was subjective. What's out of the question is that nobody's reputation has benefited more from the existence of AEW than Jon Moxley. While many left WWE still as hot prospects who just needed the right platform, the former Dean Ambrose was arguably ice cold leaving WWE as a result of their horrendous booking of him, plus what amounted to a social media smear campaign resulting from his disastrous appearance on the Stone Cold podcast. He got that rehabilitation in part from New Japan with his highly publicized G1 tournament win over Tomohiro Ishii, but he's been presented and protected on a completely different level in AEW. Let's be real, Jon Moxley is not the business mover that John Cena is, far from it, but AEW protects Moxley as much as WWE protected Cena during his prime, and I have the numbers to prove it thanks to Cage Match. AEW has existed since 2019, 5.5 years now, with his most recent match as of this writing being a Death Riders mixed tag match victory over Mark Briscoe, Speedball Mike Bailey, and Willow Nightingale. Moxley has now wrestled in 198 matches for AEW. He's won 161 of them for a staggering win rate of 81.3%. In the first 5 years of WWE's main event push of John Cena, starting from 2004 when he won the US title from Big Show at WrestleMania until 2009, John Cena wrestled an incredible 814 matches, a rate of 5 matches every 2 weeks, and amassed 687 wins for a win rate of 84.4%. If that sounds like a huge difference, from Moxley's end of things it really isn't. His much smaller sample size means that he's only like 7 wins out of the same total of matches for matching that win rate. And keep in mind that Cena's win rate is inflated by routine house show matches as well as DQ wins. Sure, most big stars in their prime win most of their matches, but in Moxley's case it really gets pretty ridiculous when you compare him to the other top guys. For shits and giggles, let's look at the 9 other men's champions. To establish something really quickly here, it should be understood that a larger sample size is more likely to result in lower winning percentage, and that the inverse is also true. Let's call this the Undertaker effect. As Undertaker slowly became WWE's arcade mode final boss during the streak, his year-by-year win rate soared from the high 60s in 2003 to the lower 90s in 2004, and then never falling below 70% until 2018. And after wrestling a career-high number of matches with 174 in 2001, Taker never wrestled more than 102 from 2002 until the end of his career, averaging only 54 matches a year during that span. In pro wrestling, veteran acts are usually not featured on TV every single week. Typically with pedigree comes the leverage to argue for less dates and more wins. CM Punk, with the most limited sample given his brief tenure, racked up an 81.8% win rate, only marginally better than Moxley's. Not surprising given the honeymoon period wasn't even supposed to be over when he won the title, and he only wrestled a total of 33 matches for the company. Bryan Danielson, famously allergic to winning big matches, has an AEW win rate of 79.1%. Adam Page has only won 68.3% of his matches, a number totally unbecoming of the guy the promotion supposedly centers as their main character. He wins only 48.3% of his pay-per-view matches. Jon Moxley wins 60%. To pair them off, his blood rival Swerve Strickland also has a shockingly low win rate of 69.9%. Chris Jericho, who I'm told never puts anybody over, wins 65.3% of his matches. And yes, I checked, it's not much different when you put it to only singles matches, and I also checked again, and his win rate plummets to the mid-30s when you limit the sample to pay-per-view singles matches. For as much shit as Jericho gets about how he loses, at least he does actually lose. Samoa Joe has admittedly been treated very kindly with a win rate of 85.6%, though he's only wrestled 65 matches for the company and entered the company already a legend of the business, as well as somebody who, like Moxley, Jericho, or CM Punk, was prominently featured on WWE television before being with AEW. MJF has somehow only wrestled 88 matches for AEW and has won 75% of them, and it's worth noting that I've seen more tweets recently about how protected MJF is than Jon Moxley. Finally, Kenny Omega, who did a lot to get Moxley over early on, has won exactly 73% of his matches in spite of, much like MJF, wrestling significantly less than Moxley. And again, Moxley has a significantly higher number of matches and wins than any of the guys I named. Aside from seeing Orange Cassidy wrestle and win, there probably isn't any more common an occurrence on AEW television than to tune in and see Moxley rack up a win. We now come to a natural question. Am I only arguing this because it seems unfair that Moxley wins so much more than so many other stars? While I can't say I'm not arguing that, I would also say it's a small portion of what I'm saying. It also stands to reason that this overexposure is bad for AEW business and that they're already reaping the effects. Something worth noting, Moxley has floated between face and heel for much of his run, given that even as a definitive babyface he works in the Austin mannerism of having a mildly heelish persona. Much of that is, to his credit I guess, dictated by crowd reaction. Even though on paper Moxley was still a face and MJF was still a heel when they wrestled at Full Gear 2022, the reality is that the crowd was fully behind Max after his character deepening run against CM Punk, but they were also naturally booing Jon Moxley. They were ready for change. And I don't think it's coincidental that even playing a definitive heel character, Moxley got the wrong kind of heat beating Danielson in his hometown at Wrestle Dream 2024. Some voices in the immediate aftermath of what was obviously one of the worst booking calls of the 21st century viewed the emergence of a strong heel champion as a positive for AEW's creative, up to and including Dave Meltzer, who gave the match leading to the angle 4 3/4 stars. The tune changed quickly when it became apparent that live attendance and television ratings were at their lowest lows ever for the promotion. Do I think some of this has to do with the creative failings of the Death Riders angle? Yes, but there are two things to say about that. One is that this is not a booking failure by Tony Khan. He has done his job as a booker, not flinching at all in his presentation of the act and staying the course at least long enough for multiple babyfaces to get incredibly hot in the chase. He has also given Moxley and the Death Riders stable plenty of time to explain themselves and extol some sort of clear motivation or ideology besides the heels need to start getting heat around here, and they have not. Moxley has waffled on the microphone and essentially called the entire locker room soft and unworthy of being AEW champion without offering a compelling or believable piece of evidence as to why that might be the case. Given that he's likely too professional to call on real life to build that storyline, instead of pointing out obvious potential examples like the company's own designated hero Darby Allin taking a break to go climb a mountain when the AEW title is in a goddamn briefcase, he has offered platitudes. From the moment the angle started, it needed really strong text to make it make sense, otherwise we would be, as we are, left with that which you simply cannot ignore. The character Jon Moxley is 100% right that the AEW roster is soft and that nobody can beat him, but that's only because the actual person Tony Khan won't let anybody. If you remember being a WWE fan in the 2010s, you remember exactly what this was like, except that when John Cena would pull this shtick, he would cut great promos when he'd do it. The second thing is this. I think an element that isn't being discussed enough is that regardless of whether Moxley won the belt as a heel leading an evil faction or a standalone badass babyface, it was his 5th fucking time he won the highest ranking men's title. I'm just not so sure why outlets that cover AEW, even ones that are frequently quite critical of the product, aren't willing to call out the fact that Moxley is obviously both overexposed and overprotected. It is simply natural for fans at this point, especially when the promotion invites them to boo by explicitly turning the character heel, to be tired of the character that has eaten so much of the company's screen time historically. So what should Jon Moxley do? Well, first and foremost, obviously, he must lose. He must lose the title to Hangman Page in Dallas. In a just world, he would have lost the title to Swerve at Dynasty in Philadelphia, or even in a really just world, he would have lost it to Orange Cassidy at World's End. It absolutely cannot wait until Darby Allin is done climbing down from the top of Everest. Darby Allin is a separate problem, but it should go without saying that the television has been far too good with Hangman Page chasing the Owen Hart Cup and the world title, arguably even better than it was when Swerve was chasing the title, which was also excellent. Darby Allin is not the actor or character, or frankly even worker that Adam Page is, and you also absolutely cannot convince me that it's a good idea to ever let a heel defend the title in a main event of an outdoor stadium show and then lose the belt at a much smaller arena show later in the year. If Jon Moxley feels he deserves to at some point either win or successfully defend the title at a stadium show the size of All In, believe it or not, I'm genuinely inclined to agree. But this also obviously cannot be the year where he checks that box on his resume. Now here's the part where you can take this with a grain of salt, as not only a huge fan of the guy challenging him at All In, but also, I would say, by far his most vocal critic. This character ought to spiral. He shouldn't lose the majority of his matches, but he should lose quite a few. On average, Moxley wrestles 48 matches in a full year, and let's just work on the idea of his year from All In Texas to next year's All In the UK. Adding that to his current total of 198, that would give him a total of 246 AEW matches by the middle of 2026, so for him to have a reasonable win rate of, let's say, 75%, he would need to have 185 wins, or 24 more than he has right now. As I crunch the numbers, that would mean settling for a win rate of 50% over the next year, which obviously isn't happening, so let's say instead that he wrestles 48 matches and loses 12 of them. Amongst those 12 losses ought to be highly visible singles losses to Orange Cassidy and Swerve Strickland, especially Swerve Strickland, who took the biggest loss of his AEW career to prop up the Moxley Hangman main event when I have zero doubt in my mind you sell the same or more tickets with Hangman facing Swerve for the title. Orange Cassidy has been especially screwed over by Moxley in my opinion. From October 2022 to September of 2023, Cassidy was on the run of his AEW career, defending the international title near weekly on Dynamite and never having anything less than like a 4-star match in doing so, even against often lesser opponents. He was, in my opinion, primed to wrestle for the world title, and then he got Moxley. His reward for working so hard on TV became a main event pay-per-view defeat at All Out, something I am still being told counts as the promotion elevating Cassidy, even though he has obviously never been the same since that night in Chicago. Cassidy eventually got that win back in a non-main event full year 2023 match, leading to a not nearly as good second international title reign, but Moxley just got that win back in the main event of full year 2024 in a world title match. In my opinion, they were on the verge of creating an Undertaker-like character with Orange, a guy who is rarely if ever world champion but has the cachet and protection of one, who had then become meaningful for young talent to beat. It did not happen. Moxley also still holds a win over Will Ospreay during Ospreay's run in New Japan, and they've yet to wrestle in any capacity in AEW. That should be on the list. Ospreay has done nothing but business since showing up in AEW. Career win rate 74.2%, even with a small sample of 90 total matches. Pay-per-view win rate only 70.6%, and that's for a guy a lot of people thought was instantly walking in and winning the title. He should be rewarded for his excellent efforts at getting over both Swerve and Hangman in particular, and he should absolutely get his win back from the NJPW days as a means of keeping him going, even if I do actually think that match would look hilarious in the ring. Call this one a personal pick, although this guy is moving up the card one way or another. Kyle Fletcher should be racking up a win. In terms of the sort of NJPW-born hyperworkers that carry AEW's pay-per-view cards, Kyle Fletcher has been maybe the best big match wrestler in AEW since getting his singles push during Mark Davis's injury. This one isn't happening, and in fact, don't count me surprised if Moxley gets a ludicrous win over Fletcher when Fletcher's momentum is peaking, but it should. Moxley's Death Rider cohorts Claudio and Wheeler Yuta should also probably get singles wins, especially Yuta. For as badly as Orange Cassidy has been sacrificed to prop up Moxley, nobody has been outright buried by him and the entire Death Rider / Blackpool Combat Club faction as Yuta, who's been their training dummy for many years now, like multiple times longer than Kenta Kobashi's famous career start losing streak. Among the more egregious elements of watching a babyface lose the championship and their career in their hometown is that when it was over, it was absolutely the perfect time to turn Yuta babyface by having him try to save Danielson and then lose to Moxley at the next Dynamite, and it didn't happen, with Yuta like almost anti-turning by choking out Danielson himself. Wheeler Yuta is a pretty damn good wrestler, but he's not featured even remotely in this faction, and it's more than past time, much like rival Daniel Garcia, for him to be featured as one of their next hyper workers to come from the US indie style, and I'm frankly afraid we might be years too late to this push. And that's just just his portrayal in that faction. Moxley is also 3-0 against Yuta in singles matches. With Claudio, it's not as dramatic, it's just that he very simply deserves to get a top-level win in this company. His work and his presentation have both been consistently excellent, and I can't wait to hear this guy coming out to the 1812 Overture again, mixed with his current arena-based entrances in the late-era Death Riders gimmick. And there, we've got about 6 pay-per-view opponents he can lose to over the course of the next year, plus a few losses in tags, so that about does it. Is there any chance this will actually happen? Fuck no. Absolutely zero chance they continue to do anything except present Moxley as perhaps their biggest star, but I would tell them to consider the case of Kazuchika Okada. By the time main event Okada left NJPW, his last Tokyo Dome main event was finishing up a Superboss side quest against Bryan Danielson. He accomplished everything in New Japan, setting the record for the longest IWGP title run, most days held, and most consecutive defenses to the point where they had to reset the title lineage by introducing that godforsaken NJPW Heavyweight Championship. He also won the G1 4 times, second only to Masa Chono in that category, and main evented the Tokyo Dome 8 times, second only to Tanahashi, whom he is also second to in total IWGP title reigns. They stacked so many kayfabe career accomplishments on Okada so quickly that there was no reason for him not to leave if he wanted to expand his legacy. AEW isn't quite on that track with Moxley since he has yet to win the Owen Hart Cup or the Continental Classic, but he has already resoundingly maxed out the AEW title. Hangman's first run as champion was regrettably short when it came to establishing a new absolute peak level guy, only 197 days. Swerve also suffered a disappointingly short reign of 126 days that also ended with him doing a job to a veteran that only led to bad things. Hey, Tony, maybe stop doing this? For Hangman to reach Moxley's career record of days holding the title, he would have to go on a title run as long as MJF's first. I fully support this, by the way. MJF's long title run ruled. There is simply no reason for Moxley to win this belt again for at least like 18 months. That does give you good news, though, is that there are things for Moxley to do in the promotion even as a singles act besides constantly be near the world title. But I would argue that before rushing to those, they should consider actually using some of his momentum on somebody else, especially since by now there's no more juice left in Moxley's current incarnation as leader of the Death Riders, a faction that used to be called Blackpool Combat Club and has existed with ultimately very few changes since 2022. Give somebody else that rocket for a little bit and see what happens. All of this is to say, if all the casuals are sick of him now, just imagine how long I've been sick of him. There's just no reason to make the greatest prize in your particular corner of the sport be the sole possession of this one guy when there are so many better athletes and, at this point, so many better characters that should be used to feature. I'm begging you, man. And this time, don't let him slink off to New Japan to clean that company out either. Make him stick around. I'm not quite sure how to end this, so just to really hammer it home one more time, how about we take a look at Moxley's AEW singles record against some of their most notable names. Listed here are only names that AEW have featured as champions or as notable pushes. Former AEW champion and legend of the business, Samoa Joe, 1-0. Former AEW champion, Swerve Strickland, 2-0. Former TNT champion and legend of the business, Adam Copeland, 1-0. Founding international champion, Orange Cassidy, 2-1. Potential GOAT candidate, Bryan Danielson, 3-0. Former TNT champion, tag champion, and Four Pillars member Darby Allin, 2-0. Former international champion, Konosuke Takeshita, 3-0. Former Ring of Honor champion and legend of the business, Mark Briscoe, 2-0. Potential GOAT candidate, Kenny Omega, 2-2. Former AEW champion and elite alumni, Adam Page, 2-2. Former TNT champion and Four Pillars member, Sammy Guevara, 2-0. Legend of the business, Chris Jericho, 2-0. Three-time Ring of Honor Pure Champion and former AEW Trios Champion Wheeler Yuta, 3-0. Inaugural Continental Classic winner and former AEW Triple Crown Champion Eddie Kingston, 2-1. Former AEW Champion MJF, 1-1. Former AEW All-Atlantic Champion and two-time Trios Champion Pac, 1-0. And finally, former IWGP Champion Jay White, 0-1. And it was a tournament bracket match, and he pinned him in the triple threat to go to the Continental Classic final against Kingston. In those 40 singles matches, he has 31 victories and a win rate of 77.5%. I'll see you next time.